You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Welcome to the studio, welcome to the microphone, Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
Thank you for having me, Colin. Welcome to you and welcome to everyone who is listening.
Well, we had a chat during the week about the topic of the day, and I was very happy to hear of a positive story that you'd heard this week that you wanted to discuss, and it was enlightening, wasn't it?
But it was, and it's heart-lifting. But I would like to ask, sometimes it's hard for us to come up with a topic every week because, as you've heard us say on previous shows, the news is always full of bad things, negative. Very few things are positive. So we put out a challenge to you. We'd like you, because Colin and I are thinking of doing a good news half hour. Only good news. We put out a challenge to you all. Contact Colin with a good news story. We won't be able to do all of them, but some will stand out. And I'll give you an example of how it stands out. Most of you will have heard in this past week of that young 13-year-old boy in Western Australia, in Big Shark area off the coast, swimming for 4 hours in rough seas to get to shore to save his mother and his 2 brothers. He got to shore, he swam it, luckily he was not attacked by a shark. I think that area is also a great white area. I'm not 100% sure, but he got to shore. Now, he collapsed. He was 13 years old, and he lay there for some time.
A warm and sunny day
across the emotions of realising I've lost my mother and my brothers, and I'll go back and how they got there in a minute. Anyway, the good side of him kicked in and said, no, I have to save them. So he got up and he ran 2 kilometres to get help. So he'd swum 4 kilometres, stayed in the water for 4 hours, rough water. If you see the state of the ocean where he did it, it's rough. And that's what caused them in their kayaks to get into trouble. Mother was in a kayak with the youngest, I think. He was in a kayak with his next brother, and they were kayaking, and he said he became concerned that they were too far offshore, and the wind was strong, and they were being blown further out, which offshore winds will do, and sideways. So he decided, brave young man, he decided, I got to get out of this and swim for it. Well, he did. 4 hours in the water. He was obviously swimming at 1 kilometre an hour because he swims 4 kilometres, gets to shore, rests for a bit, exhausted, gets up, runs 2 kilometres, raises the alarm. And I think he went back out in a rescue helicopter, but boats went out and got his mother. Most of you will have seen this on the news a few days ago. Now, what a beautiful story of courage,
yes, absolutely,
and of commitment, and what a good news story. And I just hope that he is recommended for the highest civilian bravery award, whether it's the Cross of Gallantry. We have all new awards now, but I would certainly support him being recommended for the highest civilian bravery award, 13 years of age.
And that's the bit that gets me. 13 years of age, has the ability to think through fear,
yes,
think through worry, concern, dive into the water, swim 4
yes,
kilometres, raise the alarm, and save his family.
Well, I heard him speaking, and what you've just said, Colin, he said, I had to keep my mind straight. You know,
yes,
I couldn't panic. I just had to keep swimming. Well, the other person who should be awarded is Ahmed El Ahmed. He should be awarded the highest civilian bravery award, and for what he did at Bondi. And when I heard Benjamin Netanyahu praise him in Israel and say, what a courageous man, and he went through talking about it, and then at the end of his statement he said, oh, and he's a Muslim.
was nice to
And he
hear,
was
wasn't it?
saving Israeli Jews.
I thought it was lovely to hear as well. So there is some positives in all of our negatives that we do
there is.
here, and it's great that we can actually pluck them out and highlight them,
Yes.
and spend a little bit of time thinking through, because it is that. You often hear the old war stories where those people who could think when they were racked with fear
Yes.
were able to make decisions and get out of harm's way, and those who
Yes.
couldn't, unfortunately, potentially put themselves in harm's way and didn't survive. So it was
Yes.
lovely that this young boy at 13, 14 years of age was able to do that.
I think that's right, and we need to do more in amongst ourselves and our communities to encourage what you've just touched on. That is, when it's a dire situation, do your best not to panic. Keep your mind working, work it through, and you've got a very good chance of getting through it.
Look,
I think Ahmed al-Ahmed must have thought that. He's there hiding beside a car, and he looks, and there's a bloke with shooting a high-powered rifle, I think, which the father was at that time, or shotgun, I'm not sure which. And he obviously went through his mind, do I just stay here and do nothing, or do I get... And I heard him interviewed by Americans. He was flown to America and was on their news shows, and he said, I had to balance between protecting myself and protecting others. And I remember he made a comment similar to, I'm an Australian, this is where I've come to live. These people are Australians. I have a responsibility to protect fellow Australians.
Nice.
Now, wasn't that tremendous?
Yes.
And they were Jews and he was a Muslim. The two groups in the world today who find it virtually impossible to support each other.
Look, as I've said to you in the past and said to you on this show, we take ethnicity out of it, we take religion out of it, and that was an act of madman. A couple of years ago, we had a mentally deranged person run around a shopping centre and stab people. We did not hear about religion, and we did not hear about ethnicity. So, we just need to recognise it for what it was. You cannot get into persons' minds and realise
you need
they're going to harm someone today.
With religion, because most of Israeli Arab concept is based on religion, and it's based on the Quran and Islam. And we heard responses on that Australia doesn't have a gun problem, it has a radical Islam problem. Now that's a statement of truth. Whether we like it or not, I was very pleased, but we'll get back to good news in a minute. I was very pleased to see that a young Australian, nice-looking man, who is an Australian Nazi, well, he's been sentenced to prison. That's right, he should.
Yes, indeed.
All right,
let's move on from the negative. We were trying to keep it positive.
Yeah, well, but I can't think of anything else, can you?
I can.
Good.
We also do a lot of history on the show, and one of the historical components this month is it's in February, the 13th Amendment in the United States was signed by Abraham Lincoln. Some of you may know what it is.
How many people listening, ask yourself, know what the 13th Amendment was?
I know, but I don't know about other people. So, at the end of the day, it's interesting. I know my son wouldn't, because it wasn't taught in
school.
At school,
No.
It comes down to those people who are interested.
Yes.
And of course, at some point, it was taught in school. So,
Well, I wasn't taught it.
it was, so the 13th Amendment is the amendment banning slavery in the United States.
To the U.S. Constitution.
Yes, and there's a lot of historical components around that leading up to it.
Yes.
Slavery was illegal in the United States for
In 11 states.
200 years before that. So it had been...
Well, they weren't states then, they were colonies.
Yes.
But when the United States gained independence in 1776 and officially in 1779, there were 11 states then, they had been colonies, who had slavery. And then there were battles from the 18 teens, really, through the 20s, the 30s and the 40s, when admitting new states will they be allowed to have slaves? That caused great argument. Texas came in 1845. It was an independent country until the late 1840s. It decided to join the Union because there was no Confederacy then, but they wanted to have slaves. California in the late 1840s was asked to join the Union. Now, the Americans jumped at it because it gave them right across that big continent, and it gave them an outlet to the Pacific. But the battle raged. Well, should we admit it if it's going to have slavery? And of course, we all know what happened. That ultimately led, sadly, to the American Civil War.
Absolutely, it did, and a terrible death toll.
Oh, gee, yes. 628,000 Americans.
Yes, absolutely, and to a country that is nothing like what it was today. 620,000 was a great swathe of their population.
I think it was only equalled after Vietnam, with American deaths, and the First World War, the Second World War, Korea,
yes,
and then Vietnam. That's when it finally caught up with totaling First, Second, Korean. 620,000 odd. So that one war that went for 4 years, between 1861 and April 1865, when you count both sides, was 48,000 killed. Now, you've got to remember, though, there were between 1861 and 1865 two nations on that continent. There was the USA and there was the CSA, that is the Confederate States of America. Now, no one recognised the CSA. They tried to get the British and European countries, but it was more than just slavery, though. The question of states' rights, the right, and this is where the pro-slave states said, it's our right to decide whether we have slaves, not the federals in Washington. Well, the Union didn't agree with it, and then Abraham Lincoln did something was really devastating. In November 1862, and there was still 2 years of the Civil War to go, he banned slavery and freed the slaves. Basically said, if you come into the Union territory, you will be free.
Wow.
And the Confederate States hated that, and they made it clear if we get any, and they sent agents all up into Pennsylvania. Maryland was half-half. Half the state agreed with slavery, the other half didn't, but they sent agents up to capture slaves and bring them back. And they did bring a lot back. But there was also the Underground Railroad that the Union had arranged that a slave down in Georgia or Alabama, if could get to that Underground Railway, they had people throughout those Confederate states who would move them, a bit like in the Second World War in France when Pilate was shot down, he was moved from house to house.
And slowly got out of there.
Back.
Look, it's interesting, the political environment of the time. It is a wonderful, if you dive into the minutiae of all of that, some of the 13th Amendment and banning of slavery really was the setup for the America that we actually see today.
Well, I don't know. It was up until probably the last 20 years, but the America we see today is becoming divided again. Wokeness. Look at the divide between the Republicans and the Democrats, and we must make sure that that doesn't happen here. There are the first signs of it between Labor, because what it is, you're either Labor or you're right-wing. Well, that's an insulting thing. Anyone who would vote for the non-Labor parties, you would say, define what you mean by right-wing. I heard a young Democrat American say, yes, I can define it. If you vote for other than Democrat, it means you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're a homophobe.
And don't you love that they're just nasty words?
I won't look at the American flag, because that flag, the Stars and Stripes is a flag of bigotry, racism, and you think, oh my golly, what has happened to us?
Yes.
Now, we need to be careful that that doesn't come to that length in this country.
Look, I agree. And it does happen that way when people get frustrated with the status quo. And if you look at it, whether in the past, whether we had a Liberal or Labor government, and in America and in Europe as well, it was everything seems to be stuck in the mud. We're trying to please everyone. We're trying to make sure that we're securing votes and staying in power. And that really does, when you try to please everyone all of the time, or you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to anyone.
I saw, it wasn't Jim Chalmers, but it was another Labor politician when questioned about, look, we've got inflation back, interest rates have gone up 0.25%. And this politician said, we are just fixing the mess, or trying to fix the mess left by the Liberal. And I think there should be some kind of restraint saying, don't fall back to that. Soon as I hear that, and both sides do it, as soon as I hear that, I switch off.
Yeah, look, it's about fixing the problems of Australia and not saying they did it, they did it.
Absolutely.
This is the problem, this is the reason.
Is this good news, Colin?
Look, I think so in some respects.
Yes.
Because, again, we're not bagging anyone in any way, shape or form. We're talking about solutions. And solutions for us is what is the best outcome for Australia. And again, you look at Abraham Lincoln in that one example, made a decision for his country that he felt was the best at the time, and that is freeing slaves. I think in hindsight, if we stand and look at that through our eyes today, it was a good decision.
Oh, I think anyone should agree with that. And that ran for 2 years of the Civil War. Slavery was abolished. Abraham Lincoln in November 1862 had to go through the Congress the emancipation of African Americans. But you look today, that bitterness of black-white still is there today. I watched a show, I watched a show where there were African Americans were asked by other African Americans, so do you think that the United States is a racist nation? Yes, most definitely. And the black American asking the question said, well, I don't. And the others said, how could you say that? And so you look at how these divisions can last for over hundreds of years. So look at Northern Ireland and the Republic. You know, there's division that led, from 1969 to the mid-90s of killing. And so it really is important. More good news.
More good news. I think
good news.
Again, it's a word, racism. We see it as a dark, dirty, terrible word. But then there's another word, sexism, ageism.
Yes.
Both of those words too, again, point out that someone's marginalising
someone else. But I get hit with ageism quite regularly. I get some people say, oh, can I help you, sir? You know, and I say, do I look like I need help? No, but I know how old you are. That's funny.
I'm going to tell you a funny story. A few years back, I was given a cheque just before Christmas, a bank cheque, or not a bank cheque, just a cheque. And I hadn't been into the bank for a while. Everything was direct debit, direct deposit, or a credit card and so forth. So I went into the bank and asked for a deposit slip. That's how long it had been since I'd been into the bank. And the girl says to me, oh, what do you need one of those for? We haven't had them for ages. Yep. And I said to her, oh, well, look, I've got this cheque and I need to deposit it. So she grabbed my hand and took me over to the ATM and said, let me show you how to do it.
Yeah, I know.
I was highly offended.
Yeah, well, I've had that happen to me. This young girl has said, through the ATM in the bank, you can do virtually anything.
Sure.
Now you can. You can deposit. Remember, probably 10, 15 years ago, you'd be in 20-odd years, you'd be in a line and someone would be in front of you with two big, huge cash bags.
Yes, that's right.
And you'd think, oh, no.
It's going to be forever.
It's going to be forever. So, look, times change. It's harder for people, certainly in the over 50s, to cope. But I keep telling myself, look, David, this is 2025 then. 26 now. It's not 1965 when I was 15 and I was at the height of my youth. So learn how to do things in the 2025-26 way.
Look, I think I always come back to this statement, and you say it with Cicero, but I'm going to say it a little differently.
Yes.
As much as the world changes and things are done differently, the more it remains the same. We look at the lessons of the past and we can apply those lessons to what we're seeing today.
Well, you think of all the labour-saving devices starting in the 1880s with the typewriter and the telephone, right up today with the computer. All these things that were going to make life easier, in fact, have increased the workload.
Correct.
And
well, it defines what you mean.
Live with it.
It depends on how you define easier, David. For the businessman, it's, oh, geez, they can do more.
Well, look, I am a dinosaur when it comes to computers, but I'm fortunate that I have sons who will walk in and say, "Oh, Dad, you're missing a fundamental. Easy point, bang, 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 press 2 buttons." And I think, oh, no, I wish I'd known that. So the challenge for people over 50 is to keep learning.
Oh, I agree.
To join in on that change. The challenge for the under 50s is to recognise that there's a good proportion of the population who were raised in a different era and need help.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, David Ashton Lewis, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Oh, gee, that was quick. Well, thank you for having me.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4CRB.com.